So tell me, Thea, where you are physically based. You're not actually in Boston, are you in?
I'm right next to Boston. I'm in Somerville, Massachusetts, which is, basically a subway ride away from Boston. And so it's an extension of Boston. We're right next to Cambridge, with the folk music scene there, and Club Passim and everybody that played there, back in the 60s. So there's that connection, to folk music.
You've grown up in that kind of community, or?
No, I didn't grow up in Boston. I grew up in a little town in Massachusetts called Shrewsbury, which had about 100 people. And then I spent my summers in an even smaller town on Martha's Vineyard, Gay Head, or now it's known as Aquinnah, with my Wampanoag family there. So I'm essentially a small town person. That's where I'm most comfortable. I still have to stop myself when I'm walking down the street from just kind of spontaneously saying hello to people, because that's where I grew up. That's what you would do. So.
Can I respectfully ask you more about the Aquinnah Wampanoag community that you've come from? That was on your father's side, is that right?
No, it's on my mother's
side. Yeah, because you have some really interesting lineage.
Mm-hmm. And so I spent all my childhood summers there with my relatives and extended family, and so it was a very nurturing, welcoming. This is my sense of family comes from Gay Head and Aquinnah, and all of the amazing, loving people that were in my life, so, and are still in my life,
Yeah.
I still have a strong connection with, all of my Aquinnah Wampanoag relatives there too.
And how has that informed your musicality?
So that's a great question, Ruth. Well, it's more, I would say, basically aspects of nature, because I grew up around nature, and it just influences me. It's where I feel most comfortable. It's where I have a sense of kind of comfort and a kind of a spiritual connection. And my music, a lot of my lyrics, they really reflect that experience. And so that, I would say that has a strong connection. In the last 5 years, I've connected with the Indigenous community really much more than I had before. And, in the United States and in Canada, and Indigenous folk in Australia that I've connected with, I met Auntie Rhoda a couple years ago.
Oh, Rhoda Roberts. Yeah. Yep. She's a wonderful woman. Yep.
She's amazing. She's absolutely amazing. And so and some other people that I've met as well, that are based in Australia. So Alethea Beeson and Sue Ray and some different folk. So it's changed my life. I mean, I have to say, connecting with the Indigenous community over the last several years has just really changed the trajectory of what I've been doing musically, the level of support,
That the two songs that you're most known for, which is Jesus is on the Wire and The Ghost of Emmett Till, are incredibly powerful songs, topical songs and political songs. And I guess is it that Indigenous heritage and culture too that has informed your political writing, your topical writing?
I'm not sure if that's the case necessarily. When I wrote the Jesus is on the Wire, which is dedicated to the memory of Matthew Shepard, who, God bless him, was a young gay man who was murdered in Wyoming, here in the United States. And so I have been very fortunate to have some very powerful friendships with gay men through my entire life. When I was a teenager, I had mentors that were gay men. That were so supportive and protective of me, and transgender friends. And I didn't think about, things in a kind of like, oh, you shouldn't be this or you shouldn't be that. All I really care about when I'm connecting with people is it's this, you know. I connected very, very strongly when I found out about this, you know, about Matthew Shepard and what had happened to him. And it affected me very deeply. And I'd also had a loss of a friend who, so I think I just, I connected with that. And I have, it's just material I connect with. I mean, I don't only write political songs. I write personal songs too. You know, I'm working on trying to write funny songs. I'm not quite there yet. But so it just varies, you know. It just depends on what hits me at the moment, you know.
Yeah. You're the only other person, well, that I know that plays Americana style in Dadgad.
I do.
So how did you have you been using Dadgad for a long time, or?
The way I discovered Dadgad, I went to a guitar workshop with Happy Trom. This was about, you know, probably about 14 years ago, and I hadn't used it before, and so he said, you know, this is a tuning, and so I tried it out, and then I was listening to a lot of other, so it was like listening to Nick Drake, you know, and I'm like, oh, that guy, you know, so I started to just fall in love with the tuning, and so that's the way I discovered it, and I started writing it, and I love it. I mean, as you know, it's so emotionally evocative that it just, I find it just kind of pulls things out of you sometimes, you know, that you don't expect.
And did you study composition
I went to
Berkeley?
I did. I studied composition at Berkeley, but I started writing as a kid. I wrote poetry, and I was obsessed with weird things as a kid. I was obsessed with the opera Carmen, you know. I was obsessed with Edith Piaf. I mean,
oh wow.
I was a strange little girl in some ways. So, but these were the things, and I loved Broadway musicals, you know. I mean, I loved, you know, Rodgers and Hammerstein, Carousel. I mean, all of these, just, I don't know, West Side Story, just the music, everything. Anyway, it wasn't part of my life plan, but, you know, that's the way things, you know how it is.
Yeah.
But yes, I studied composition at Berkeley, and I wasn't into jazz at all before I was there. I was like, okay, well, let's just try this. And so I learned a lot there, and you know, it does what it was supposed to do, is open up your ears and challenge you. And I love a musical challenge. And so yeah, the real book, and, you know, all the tunes in the real book and all the standards, and also just giving yourself permission, like with Dadgad, to try out different tunings, try out different voicings with chords. I mean, I think that's, it's equally as important. Once you start to, as you know, you start to give yourself permission to access those creative areas in yourself. And it's an unfolding, you know? And so it's a process that you start to just trust, and you have to just kind of trust it, as you know.
I read somewhere that you have had songs come to you in dreams. Has your songwriting, I wanted to ask you what your general songwriting process is now, and has that changed over the years, or is it sort of an inherent kind of method for you, I guess, something that
Well, it depends. No, it doesn't. I think I think we all have, you know, a baseline as far as talent, and then you decide whether or not how much you're going to develop an area. So for myself, I'm obsessed with lyrics. I wait for melodies to come to me, which they, you know, thankfully they do. And if they hit, they hit, and then I'll record them. But, you know, melodies can come to you, and it's like, yeah, okay, that's all right. You know, we'll put that aside. But you just, sometimes I just listen, you know, I wait for something to come to me. I'll work on things. I'll set it aside. I read a lot of different poets. I read a lot of Imagist poets like Emily Dickinson and Wallace Stevens, and, you know, lots of different people, because I just feel like you can learn a lot from somebody else's style of writing. And so I look for writers that are very good at using words in an economical fashion. I had a guitar teacher that said, you should listen to Hank Williams. I mean, basically he was saying, listen to what he does in 3 minutes. And it's like, you can't really beat that as far as advice, in certain ways. I mean, this is right. So so I try to absorb as much as I can. And if I love just my favorite thing, I love to perform once I'm, can do that. But I love just hiding away with notebooks, with my legal pads, a pen, my computer, and just I could be there for a long period of time and just come out and go back into the room, and that's, I mean, it's, I love it. I'm in the midst of doing this program that I created called In the Roundhouse, which presents traditional and contemporary Indigenous musicians. It's a project that it evolved from a performance that I was part of. It's almost a year and a half ago. It was at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
And so, it was amazing. It was part of the opening of this expansion of the Kennedy Center, their performance area called the Reach. And so they had one day they had set aside during this week-long festival for Indigenous artists. So I was invited to perform with 2 other Indigenous artists, a couple of friends of mine. And after I agreed to do it, they called me back and they said, well, what do you think we should call the program? And so I thought, well, I'm not sure, but I'll get back to you in a little while. So I thought about it literally for 10 minutes. And I said, let's call it In the Roundhouse, because in traditional Indigenous culture, the roundhouse is a place for gathering and celebration and community. So after that night, I thought, I want to do this again. And so I did a showcase at it for an arts foundation in Massachusetts. And, people have reached out to me about bringing this program to other places, which I'll do. And I'm happy to do that, to present contemporary and Indigenous artists to wider audiences. And also it will also offer their workshops involved in a teaching curriculum for some teachers that are interested in expanding their knowledge of Indigenous music. And so it evolved from that. So
when did you start performance and music? I mean, you've obviously been writing songs for your whole life.
Yeah. So no, I had planned on becoming a psychologist or becoming a therapist. And so I had a loss of a friend that affected me very deeply, and I didn't know how to express my feelings, and so I picked up a guitar and started writing, and it was a turning point in my life, basically. And so then I realized, do I really want to be a therapist, or I'm trying to think about these different things I wanted to do, but I didn't go into it right away. And I ended up working in the corporate world and for a while, and I went to Berkeley, and so it was an evolution. But it was one of those things where it kept pulling me back, no matter what. It was such a strong thing in me that once it was awakened, I realized this is my path. And this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so that's kind of what happened, but it's odd the way things evolve and how you find your path,